Good everyone. I hope you guys have an amazing day. So what I'm going to do today, I'll talk about inclusive design, which is really important from a lot of reasons, right? Let me start with a very simple example, right? You might have traveled using a train, right? Or you might have traveled using perhaps using plane or bus, right? Let's stick to a train example, right? So when you board a train, right, you got a very simple option, right? In most of the trains, you have a place where you can enter, right? You got steps, you climb the steps, right, and you're able to, get inside the train, and perhaps you can, using the right indicator, right, you'll be able to find your position, right, like your seat or your, compart, whatever you call it, sleeper section, right, using the ticket number, right? That's great. I mean, that's fantastic option. If you're an able person, right, you can walk. But think about a scenario, right? If you are someone who is using wheelchair, right? Do you think that the steps will work for the wheelchair person? Not really, right? So if the train hasn't catered for that, then it will be a huge challenge for someone with a wheelchair to get inside the train, right? So most, like, I commute sometimes using the train. I used to back in the days, but now most likely I have to in the future. Uh, so the train which I commute, right, there is a wheelchair option. So it's an old-fashioned train, but still, who are designed it, right? They've thought about that, right? So that is an inclusive design to me, right? You are considering people who are not a part of what people call norm. I'm not saying uh, people with wheelchair are not a part of norm. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying when you think about a design, when you build something, right? You normally build, okay, people get down in the train, sorry, get inside the train using the steps, right? That's the usual design that people often think about it. Wheelchair access, it's just something which is important because not everyone, like I said, is able to walk, right? Some people have other issues using which they have to use it. So the train should consider that. Another option, right? Let's say, even if you're abled, let's say you're a foreigner visiting, say, Japan, right? Where Japanese is very common. Now, let's say you get inside the train, right? Or forget about that, right? Let's say you wanted to catch a train and the train arrived in a station and the train is standing there. Now, let's say everything is written in Japanese and there's no English underneath. Let's say you only speak English, right? You're a tourist. Now, does that make you a misfit? Well, in one way, yes, in one way, no, right? Because you're not a misfit, you're a tourist, right? Which do not belong to that country, but you still want to visit it. So imagine if the train, of a design of a train, hasn't considered, uh, an international visitor, then it's a challenge for the visitor, right? Unless the Japan say, hey, look, we don't care about the tourists. We only want Japanese to travel. That's understandable. That's perfectly fine. But if say a city like Tokyo, right, where you wanted to take a train from like Tokyo to another city, right? And if you're a tourist and if you don't understand Japanese, if you have no idea, even a single word about Japanese, then if it will pose a big challenge to the people, right? So if imagine the train who has an English writing as well as the Japanese, right? It makes the job of a person very easy, right? And not every Japanese speak English. It's a misconception, right? Some older Japanese, they don't speak English. I mean, you don't expect them to do that because in their country, Japanese is the language which is spoken, right? So which is obviously, they're using their own language, it's their own country, it's their own culture, so you can't really expect. But what I'm trying to say is that if you build a train which is supposed to be used by not only Japanese but for international people, let's say from China, from India, from the United States, from New Zealand, um, then having an English, writing underneath will definitely help because that will include a lot of people and make the life of the people to take the ride, right? And now, Another thing, that's once, I give you a very simple example, right? As you can see about the wheelchair example, right? But I give you a train example because I have seen that in the train which I take, right? I'm proud to say, right? Even though it's an old fashioned train, they still considered that design of including people with a wheelchair, which is great. And there's an option to, take your cycle, bike, I mean, your luggage and kind of stuff. Right. Now, you must be wondering, right? That's great. Now, why are we doing it? Right? That's the question you should be asking. Why are we not doing it? Because if it's so obvious, right? There's a reason behind it, right? Like Trailhead mentioned, three reasons. The fear of inclusion, right? There are three fears, right? What if I say something wrong? Like I said, right? If you remember, I spoken about a term like, according to people, they think it's not normal. No, like I said, like about the train design, it's out of the norm. Now, the word I use, pay attention to the out of the norm. It may offend somebody. The person might say, "What do you mean? We are not normal people?" Or "What do you mean? We are retarded?" So the conversation can go in a different way, right? So you never know, what statement you make which can offend somebody. So that's one fear of inclusion people might have. Or what if you get it wrong? What if you use the terminology which might offend people? Because where you draw a limit, right? Because these days, I'll be honest. I mean, people get offended with every single thing, right? Have very low tolerance for any kind of criticism whatsoever because the society we're moving is unfortunately is like a thin-skinned society we're heading to, which is not really great, right? That's defines the law of being defines the experience of being a human, right? I'm not saying that you should take an abuse. I'm not saying you should take somebody throw rubbish at you. I'm not saying about that. I'm just saying it's okay to face constructive criticism at time, right? Even people are not willing to do that, right? When you're wrong, it's okay to acknowledge that. That's all I'm trying to get. And they have to create a lowest common denominator design. That's pose another challenge. Um, And also, what happens, right? Sometimes companies don't have expertise who deals with inclusion, right? They need to bring people who understand different people perspective. Let's say you're building a this. Um, let me give you an example, right? Let's say you're writing a software, right? In the software, you have to capture person information, right? So usually you have salutation, you have title. Let's say you wanted to capture, you put gender, right? Which is a pretty common issue these days, but I like to address it either way. So now if you have, let's say in a software system, gender male or female, pretty much it. Let's say a person say, I don't want to associate with any gender. How do you cater for that? Are you going to exclude that person? Or we have transgenders these days. How are you going to cater for that? And some people, yeah, let's say four, right, for now. So how do you get a cater for that? Many people will say, "Oh, we got two genders." That's not the point. Point is, everyone have a right to associate the way they wanted to associate themselves, right? No one has any right to, judge. Like I associated myself as a male. That's my right. Someone associate themselves with, non-binary, which is fine. I have personally have no problem with it. And why? Think about it, right? This is really what frustrated me to the core. How does someone aligning themselves to, say, a non-binary or non-gender has any impact on someone else's life? It makes no sense to me, right? It's like unless someone is really old-fashioned, like from 1600, who extraordinarily conservative, then I get it. But even then, someone aligning themselves with different genders should not have any problem with it. Like I said, I'm a male, and I put my gender as male, but I wanted to give the same opportunity to someone who don't want to associate themselves with anything, right? So that's called inclusive design, right? And we are in 21st century. So that's one reason why sometimes companies don't hire inclusive designer, they won't have it. They will say, all right, it's a cognitive bias, right? You'll say, okay, put male and female, get it over. But then you actually interact with the real people, you know, that can pose a challenge. So that's one thing. Now, universal design and inclusive design, right? I mean, this lady, she spoke about, if you wanted to, listen to it, you can go to the trailhead and listen to her talk, right? Now, the three inclusive design principle I wanted to talk. I don't really there's I will. So if you wanted to know about inclusive design, universal design, right? If you I tell you from my perspective, right? If you just making a one fit size for all, right? Then you can put that under universal design. But in this scenario, I'm not really after that. I'm just after a inclusive design which can be custom tailored and then can be expanded, right? So this is the design principle. Recognize exclusion. You need to understand that we got a problem, right? If you don't acknowledge that we got a problem, we will never put any kind of effort to fix it, right? And then we got to learn from diversity, right, in a team. Let me give you an example, right? I'm a Jewish man, right? I yes, I haven't followed Jewish faith, to the extent, right? I've eaten bacon, which is forbidden in my faith, and I haven't not recognized my faith when I was growing up because I often used to consider myself as an atheist. But then as I grow older, my partner, she's a Jewish as well, but from Europe. So our cultures are different, but still, the religion perspective, tradition perspective, a lot of things are similar, right? But that being said, right? When I, you know, when we interact in a group of a team, right? Let's say you have a big company, right? It doesn't matter if you are from the same religious group or from the same place. People have different choices, right? People have different preferences. So that's one of the way to understand the diversity. Or another thing, let's say you ordered a pizza, right? In your team, you have. I'm the reason why I'm bringing religion, right? Because it's the most pressed topic in the world. You go to any freaking part of the world, people get pressed about it, right? I just don't understand why, but whatever. Let's move on. So, let's say you have a big group of people, right? And you have Christians, you have Hindus, you have Buddhists, and Hindus and Buddhists, mostly vegetarians. They don't eat beef, right? Muslims, Jews, we normally don't eat pork, which is forbidden in our faith. Is we don't consider it I mean, at least to us, it's not kosher, right? It's unholy for us. And similar to Muslim, it's not holy for them, it's right. And Christians, they have, I don't know. But let's say you decide to, let's say you decide to bring a pizza, right? And if you bring pizza which has, let's say, ham and cheese, perhaps an atheist guy will say, I can eat it. Maybe a Jewish guy who is not religious can, I can eat it. Or an Orthodox just say, no, I'm not going to touch it. And a Muslim person say, no, I'm going to touch it. And perhaps, Hindus and Muslims say, no, it's meat. We're not going to touch it either. So what does that tell you? You haven't considered diversity at all, right? If you just think that one size fit for all. That's just a stupid example, you might think, right? But just think about it from a food perspective, right? If you're working in a team, right, it's very important to include different people. Perhaps you can say, hey guys, I hope everyone can eat vegetarian because we are a different group. Let's stick to vegetarian diet for now. Problem solved. Everyone can eat, let's say, spinach and cheese. No problem, right? Because there's another thing you have to remember when you're dealing with a Jewish person. We are not supposed to eat the dairy and mixed meat together. It doesn't work for us. So that's another thing, right? So if you're a vegetarian, right, who cares? You can mix spinach, you can put, whatever. So I'll just give an example. And then sometimes, some businesses, some software, They put religious, not religious option. How do I say ethnicity, right? That's another thing. Some people prefer not to say, right? You need to consider that as well, right? And some people can be mixed race. How do you cater for that? So you have to learn from the diversity and then solve for one and extend for many. So that's a very good approach, right? You try to solve for one aspect of it. Let's say you start with the gender, solve for it, and then you can extend to different groups like ethnicity, or food, or whatever. So that's a very great principle, right? In my opinion, because if you think about it, right, it's not a rocket science. It's a very simple design. All you have to do is that understand the problem, find a solution to the problem, start with the one simple problem and extend it, right? And learn from diversity is a big thing because the world is getting diverse. People are moving to different parts of the world, and a lot of uh, immigration happening. Skilled people move from one place to another. So you might see in a company a Dutch person working with perhaps a Chinese person working with an Indian guy, and a Korean working perhaps with an American. So there are different diversity out there, right? So when you're designing a software, it plays an important role. I'm talking from a software perspective, but can extend to hardware or like I said, the train industry, or you can talk about construction. Different ways you can extend. But so that's pretty much I wanted to talk about inclusive design. And I personally believe this is a very interesting topic. If you wanted to know about more, right, you can come to Trailhead and can listen to this person talking. You'll get to know more information, right? So yeah, that's all I wanted to talk. I hope you guys have an amazing Tuesday. Adios.